Subscribe to Baby Gang on Patreon for updates and bonus content.
I've become quite wary of the idea of unstanning. Specifically, I'm really not feeling this ongoing trend of getting on social media and telling the world that you unstand an artist and why. The reasons why I don't like this trend are kind of complicated, but it starts, as everything does, with an eye-roll-worthy pothead question. What does it even mean to stan an artist, bro? This is one of those questions that sometimes seems easier to answer than it actually is. Though Oxford defines a stan as an overzealous or obsessive fan, sourced from Eminem's song Stan about a violent fictional fan, the reclamation of the term has insinuated a kind of sarcastic yet sincere embracing of this idea, that it's okay to passionately love an artist, though the lines are often blurred as to how far that passion should actually go. Why are you defending people you don't know on the internet when you don't know them and they don't know you and you don't love them because they don't love you, etc., etc.? But now, thanks to how colloquial the term stan actually is, it has, as has every popularized slang term, lost a lot of its original meaning and now kind of just means whatever people want it to mean. This is the nature of language. It's very limited, it's not nearly as effective as we want it to be when communicating to one another, and as a result, it's often easier to make goofy faces at each other in real life than use our words. Regardless, I define standing as close to its original meaning a genuine passion and fixation with a particular artist or celebrity. But it seems to me that a lot of people do not take this term to be as intense as it originally meant. In fact, a lot of people seem to say they stan artists quite hastily, without really having the kind of powerful connection and passion that the term stan would suggest they have. Now, I don't mean to sound like a crotchety gatekeeper who is going to tell you exactly how you should engage with things and use words because otherwise the world will explode. At the end of the day, use your words how they suit you. Live your best life. But I will say I strongly urge people, especially before they get to the point of publicly unstanning, to think more deeply about how and why they stan. There are people who claim to stan dozens of artists. I just don't know how you would have the cardio to do that. And maybe standing feels to them the best way to express how they follow these artists, but frankly, if it's not close to that original meaning, I don't like it. If you stan one artist because you're obsessed with them and you care about them and their art deeply, and you stan another artist because you like them and their music, well, the terminology is sitting right there in front of you. Maybe you just like the artist. The way I conceive fandom is in levels. For me, there are artists I like who have art that I enjoy and generally bring something to the table for me that I'm attracted to. For example, I like Jid. He's a really good rapper, but I only really like a few of his songs, and though I'd be happy to dive deeper, I'm okay with not doing so for the time being. Then there are the artists that I'm a fan of. I really like what they do it often, and therefore I follow their releases. I follow news about them, but I may not even think about them every day. I'm a fan of Bad Bunny. I'm a fan of Paramore. These are artists that I would definitely go see live, and they even have songs in their catalogs that have been significant to my life. But I still wouldn't say I stan them. For me to stan an artist, that would mean I'm happy to spend hours of my life digging through their content, digging through news about them, talking about them online, making friends with other stans, etc. I love a great deal of what they do, and even the stuff I don't love, I kinda love because it's them. Even though I don't have a relationship with them, they mean a lot to me as artists that I admire greatly, who have had significant impact on my life and have made art that I obsess over. So I stan BTS, I, to a lesser extent, stan Frank Ocean. He doesn't put out enough music for me to stan him as hard as I would like to. Now that's my perspective on staning as a person who is generally coming from outside of the K-pop sphere. I'm a fan of K-pop as of this year, but I'm not used to its landscape and I don't think I ever will be. It seems like folks from within the K-pop sphere, particularly young folks raised on online standing culture, are used to standing in a much more frequent way, and again, that's totally fine. But to my mind, there are many potential issues with approaching standing less carefully and passionately. For one, you could end up representing yourself online as a stan of an artist that you don't even know that deeply, that you haven't taken the time out to make the determination of why you even stan them in the first place. Standing twice solely because you like their music and you're like TT is valid, but how deeply have you thought about why you like their music? Do you like it because it just sounds good to you, or do you genuinely love the identities and personalities that members like Momo or Dahyun put forth? Are you in love with their voices and see yourself wanting to sound like Jihyo or Chonghyun in an ideal world? Does their music impact you in a real way? Do you admire the way they conduct themselves as human beings? Or do you just enjoy their music on occasion and think they seem like cool people? If it's the latter, consider what might happen if one day, God forbid, Twice do something you really don't like, and you've associated your image and your personality with them online and are now tied to that for as long as people remember, which on the internet is a long time. Are you willing to accept that dilemma of like versus dislike? Are you going to react in a healthy way, or will you lash out? Are you merely going to leave the fandom, thus complicating your feelings about the friends you've made within it and the content you enjoyed for so long? Speaking of friends, another thing that really confuses me about the unstanning phenomenon is the reasoning behind why people unstan. Given that people are making this content describing why they no longer stan artists, their reasoning has to be put forth, and often when you hear this reasoning, it leaves questions as to why this person stand and how much they stand in the first place. One of the classic reasons people will give regarding why they unstand an artist is because the stans are toxic. This reasoning confuses me for many reasons, the main one being that, in my view, you will always find toxic stans. It's part of the deal. You will often see people give this reason for unstanning BTS, which is of course the group I stan. And then you will see that these same people will go on to stan other groups whose fandoms also have toxic elements, because again, every stan community has toxic elements. So how valid was this reasoning in the first place? Often people will justify it by saying, well, since I've joined this fandom, I've noticed that it's so much less toxic. Or, I feel like X fandom is so chill, we never bother anybody, we never attack other fandoms, we just mind our business and stan. Now, these experiences might not necessarily be invalid. Pretty much everyone can relate to feeling uncomfortable in one community, then deciding to be a part of another community that makes you feel more comfortable. The problem is, stan communities, especially for very popular artists, including top K-pop groups, are far too large to generalize as untoxic. Take a second to analyze the space you're in. What you're experiencing in your fandom is not going to be reflective of the entire fandom. Don't speak for strangers that might be doing the toxic stuff you say nobody in the fandom does. You've likely just met the right people in your new fandom, and they've ushered you in a more peaceful, positive direction than you were heading in with the group you surrounded yourself with in your old fandom. But like, as an army, it's baffling to hear people talk about our fandom like it's the most toxic space in the universe, because I really haven't found it that difficult to find chill, smart, positive people. I don't feel like it's difficult to achieve that in any fandom. When Eminem wrote Stan, he wasn't talking about every single fan that is like into Eminem. He was just writing about the dangers of how certain fans will take things too far. And trust me, there are a lot of Eminem stans that take things too far, but you can still be a big fan of Eminem and make friends with a lot of other big fans of Eminem and never participate in any toxic behavior, ever. Regardless, it is true that every fandom has its own color, for lack of a better term, and so each fandom might have some slight general differences in attitude and demographics, etc. And you may just feel like the general disposition of a fandom is not vibing with you for whatever reason. This is when you factor in that there's a whole world available to you offline, and you can actually just stand quietly on your own without getting super involved in the social media spaces. You don't have to be an active member of an online fandom to stan an artist. As a matter of fact, if you really love an artist and care about what they do, and they truly have impacted you in a significant way, then it should take some significant nonsense from fellow stans that you've interacted with to make you consider unstanning. Consider how many people are stans of Playboi Carti and Frank Ocean online, and how many of those stans are absolute jerks. But should that ruin anyone's connection with those artists' music if they mean a lot to them? I don't think so. But of course, people have different connotations of what stan means, like I said, so maybe standing is relevant to the online space. Maybe you can't be a stan unless you're openly and proudly and socially a stan. I don't know. I don't personally feel that way. Of course, K-pop is one of the few spaces in which standing is actually encouraged, and in fact, it is a whole mode of socialization and cultural engagement. This industry runs on people watching V-Lives, trending hashtags, streaming videos, and even posting fan cams. The stan is much more empowered in K-pop than in hip-hop spaces, wherein being perceived as a stan is often considered a bad thing. Of course, there are positives and negatives to this. People's lives can be profoundly impacted by being part of a mobilized fandom. You can meet cool people, you can learn a lot, you can grow a lot, and you can connect with an artist who cares that you're there. But there are also some real downsides to the commoditization and the proliferation of stans. There's an unsettling reality that capitalist enterprises rely on your passionate fandom to make money, and oftentimes they make a lot of it. There is also a commoditization of the very position of being a stan. Rather than simply loving an artist because you love them, there's a labor aspect. Being a stan resembles having a job in some ways for a lot of people, so it's possible that, in many cases, rather than genuinely falling in love with an artist's work, many simply view standing as a labor commitment. Your group seems cool, so I will work to help your group grow. And that does feel quite a bit cynical. Shut the f up. Damn, ice cream truck. In addition, the power of this labor, this subculture, and this commodity can bring people a lot of clout. I should know, I am something of the clout chaser myself. I became a stan of BTS and I make content about it to showcase my writing, make fans, and build a career for myself. I even have a hard time talking about non-BTS things in my content because I feel like that's not really what people are here for. People want that juicy stan content, and I'm ever so happy to offer it. But notably, I ultimately do this because I love thinking about BTS. I love writing these video essays, and I think I'm able to contribute stuff that can help people and inform people and maybe make a positive impact. At least I like to think that. Where am I going with this? Well, the first real reason I have reservations with this trend is because there's a cynical, clout-chasing element to it. Do you want to know how to get a bunch of views on YouTube? Make a video titled, Groups I Unstand and Why. Put a picture of BTS or Blackpink or Luna on there, and watch the attention roll in. This is not to demonize anyone who's made those types of videos. Many of them are good. I'm sure many of these creators just care about the subject, like I care about what I talk about. But the economy of it troubles me. You can use these videos to think deeply about why you unstand and try to engage a purposeful, positive conversation. But there are two problems. One, you don't have to get clout. And two, even if you do, you're ultimately benefiting from putting out negative ideas about fans and groups. The second real reason I have reservations with this trend is related to that second problem. These posts and videos are harbingers for negativity. They're in a similar vein to those unpopular opinion videos. If they don't outright contain weird ideas, misinformation, or straight up negativity about an artist and their fans, they attract these things. People will inevitably enter the comment section to trash the fandoms you discussed, speculate wildly on the artist's mental health, and disparage their art. And that can be quite harmful. On one hand, it's fine to criticize art and people. It's fine to have any opinion on someone's music, and it's fine to share that opinion. Although maybe think about how you formed it and why before sharing it, because, you know, opinions are like buttholes, because poop. On the other hand, when you're speculating on and bringing negative attention towards massive communities of people and the artists they revere, you're risking making them feel bad about themselves. You're risking antagonizing them. You're risking creating playgrounds for talking smack about them, talking smack about the art and the artists that have meant so much to them, and driving further wedges between fans. You're playing into negative narratives about fandoms which are often unfair, all because you wanted to make a video about why you no longer listen to their favorite artist's music. As I close this video, I ask anyone considering unstanning an artist, and especially anyone considering posting about unstanning an artist, 3 questions. The first is, are you sure you really stan that artist? Did you just like their music and now no longer like it? Did you just have friends in the fandom? Did you just get bored? And if that happened, were you really passionate enough about them before to consider yourself a stan alongside people whose lives have been altered by this artist's music and actions? Maybe you were, maybe you weren't. But if you weren't, you can't unstan someone you never truly stanned in the first place. The second is, why are you unstanning? Traditionally, publicly unstanning an artist is used as a charged way to discuss important subject matters. For instance, you would unstan Kanye because his politics were too dangerous. But if you just didn't like the last album, how many chances did you give it? How many chances will you give the art moving forward? And if it's just a matter of the music no longer being for you or the vibes being off, rather than anything actually negative about the artists themselves, then I ask the third question. Do you really need to share this right now? If there's something going on that needs to be discussed, a social issue, an artistic integrity issue, whatever, then perhaps it's best to be public about this and spark a conversation. But if it's just a matter of personal preference or personal situation, you probably don't want to share this because it's going to be way more than that once you make your video. It's going to become a space for negativity. It might be seen as you trying to get attention based off of something like that. Imagine somebody writing an article about Ariana Grande in a publication and it being titled, "Why I No Longer Listen to Ariana Grande." And then when you read the article, they're just kind of like, well, you know, I still respect Ariana and like she's great and she's very nice and talented. It's just the past couple albums just haven't really been for me. They're not my type of music. You would be reading that like, okay.
You could have kept that to yourself instead of being dramatic about it.
It's okay to like an artist. It's okay to dislike an artist, and it's okay to change your mind on an artist. It's okay to unstan, and it's also okay not to tell anyone about it. Your feelings and your preferences will change all the time. Don't commoditize them in such a way that they're weaponized to hurt people's feelings and cause drama. People stop listening to artists all the time. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to get views from it. And you most certainly do not need to be a jerk about it.